Well poisoning, a brief contemporary account by a Franciscan friar from Franconia, Hermann Gigas. His chronicle ends in 1349. In 1347 there was such a great pestilence and mortality throughout almost the whole world that in the opinion of well-informed men, scarcely a tenth of mankind survived. The victims did not linger long, but died on the second or third day. The plague raged so fiercely that many cities and towns were entirely emptied of people. In the cities of Bologna, Venice, Montpellier, Avignon, Marseille, and Toulouse alike, 1,000 people died in one day, and it still rages in France, Normandy, England, and Ireland. Some say that it was brought about by the corruption of the air, others that the Jews planned to wipe out all the Christians with poison and had poisoned wells and springs everywhere. And many Jews confessed as much under torture, that they had bred spiders and toads in pots and pans and had obtained poison from overseas, and that not every Jew knew about this wickedness, only the more powerful ones, so that it would not be betrayed. As evidence of this heinous crime, men say that bags full of poison were found in many wells and springs, and as a result, in cities, towns, and villages throughout Germany, and in fields and woods too, almost all the wells and springs have been blocked up or built over, so that no one can drink from them or use the water for cooking, and men have to use rain or river water instead. God, the Lord of vengeance, has not suffered the malice of the Jews to go unpunished. Throughout Germany, in all but a few places, they were burnt. For fear of that punishment, many accepted baptism and their lives were spared. This action was taken against the Jews in 1349, and it still continues unabated, for in a number of regions many people, noble and humble alike, have laid plans against them and their defenders which they will never abandon until the whole Jewish race has been destroyed. The persecution of the Jews began in November 1348, and the first outbreak in Germany was at Solden, where all the Jews were burnt on the strength of a rumor that they had poisoned wells and rivers, as was afterwards confirmed by their own confessions and also by the confessions of Christians whom they had corrupted and who had been induced by the Jews to carry out the deed. And some of the Jews who were newly baptized said the same. Some of these remained in the faith, but some others relapsed, and when these were placed upon the wheel, they confessed that they had themselves sprinkled poison or poisoned rivers, and thus no doubt remained of their deceitfulness, which had now been revealed. Within the revolution of 1 year, that is, from All Saints the 1st of November 1348, until Michaelmas the 29th of September 1349, all the Jews between Cologne and Austria were burnt and killed for this crime, young men and maidens and the old along with the rest. And blessed be God who confounded the ungodly who were plotting the extinction of his church, not realizing that it is founded on a sure rock, and who, in trying to overturn it, crushed themselves to death and were damned forever. But now let us follow the killings individually. First, Jews were killed or burnt in Solden in November. Then in Zofingen they were seized and some put on the wheel. Then in Stuttgart they were all burnt. The same thing happened during November in Landsberg, a town in the diocese of Augsburg, and in Bueron, Memmingen, and Burgau, in the same diocese. During December, they were burnt and killed on the feast of St. Nicholas the 6th of December in Lindau, on the 8th of December in Reutlingen, on the 13th of December in Haigerloch, and on the 20th of December in Hor, they were burnt in a pit. And when the wood and straw had been consumed, some Jews, both young and old, still remained half alive. The stronger of them snatched up cudgels and stones and dashed out the brains of those trying to creep out of the fire, and thus compelled those who wanted to escape the fire to descend to hell. And the curse seemed to be fulfilled. His blood be upon us and upon our children. On the 27th of December, the Jews in Esslingen were burnt in their houses and in the synagogue. In Nigelton they were burnt. In the above-said town of Zofingen, the city councillors, who were hunting for poison, found some in the house of a Jew called Trostli, and by experiment were satisfied that it was poison. As a result, 2 Jewish men and 1 woman were put on the wheel, but others were saved at the command of Duke Albrecht of Austria, who ordered that they should be protected. But this made little difference, for in the course of the next year, those he had under his protection were killed, and as many again in the Diocese of Constance. But first, those burnt in 1349 will be described in order. Once started, the burning of the Jews went on increasing. When people discovered that the stories of poisoning were undoubtedly true, they rose as one against the Jews. First, on the 2nd of January 1349, the citizens of Ravensburg burnt the Jews in the castle, to which they had fled in search of protection from King Charles, whose servants were imprisoned by the citizens after the burning. On the 4th of January, the people of Constance shut up the Jews in 2 of their own houses, and then burnt 330 of them in the fields at sunset on the 3rd of March. Some processed to the flames dancing, others singing, and the rest weeping. They were burnt shut up in a house which had been specially built for the purpose. On the 12th of January in Buchen, and on the 17th of January in Basel, they were all burnt apart from their babies, who were taken from them by the citizens and baptized. They were burnt on the 21st of January in Meeskirk and Waldkirk, on the 25th of January in Speyer, and on the 30th of January in Ulm, on the 11th of February in Uberlingen, on the 14th of February in the city of Strasbourg, where it took 6 days to burn them because of the numbers involved, on the 16th of February in Mengen, on 19th of the month in Sulgen, on 21st in Schaffhausen and Zurich, on 23rd in St. Gallen, and on the 3rd of March in Constance, as described above, except for some who were kept back to be burnt on the 3rd day after the Nativity of the Virgin, the 11th of September. They were killed and burnt in the town of Baden on the 18th of March, and those in the castle below, who had been brought there from Rheinfelden for protection, were killed and then burnt. And on the 30th of May, they were similarly wiped out in Radolfzell. In Mainz and Cologne, they were burnt on the 23rd of August. On the 18th of September, 330 Jews were burnt in the castle at Kyburg, where they had gathered from Winterthur and Diessenhoven and the other towns of their protector, the Duke of Austria. But the imperial citizens did not want to go on supporting them any longer, and so they wrote to Duke Albrecht of Austria, who was protecting his Jewish subjects in the counties of Fürth, Alsace, and Kyburg, and told him that either he had them burnt by his own judges, or they would burn them themselves. So the Duke ordered them to be burnt by his own judges, and they were finally burnt on the 18th of September. And thus, within 1 year, as I said, all the Jews between Cologne and Austria were burnt, and in Austria they await the same fate, for they are accursed of God. And I could believe that the end of the Hebrews had come, if the time prophesied by Elias and Enoch were now complete. But since it is not complete, it is necessary that some be reserved, so that what has been written may be fulfilled, that the hearts of the sons shall be turned to their fathers, and of the fathers to the sons. But in what parts of the world they may be reserved I do not know, although I think it more likely that the seed of Abraham will be reserved in lands across the sea than in these people. So let me make an end of the Jews here. This and the following 2 texts are taken from material in the Strasbourg archives. The city wrote round to neighboring cities inquiring whether they had evidence that Jews were poisoning wells, and what steps they were taking against the perpetrators. The city received 11 replies in all. The formal courtesies at the beginning and end of the letters have been omitted here. We have received your gracious letters with pleasure, and have accordingly sent you in writing under our seals the confessions made by a Jew called Bonadies. He was condemned to be set on the wheel, where he survived for 4 days and nights. While he could still speak, he held unvaryingly to his first story. And we have informed you that in the lordship of the Count of Savoy, many Jews, and Christians as well, have confessed to the same appalling crime. Accordingly, they were condemned to punishment by burning and impalement. The confessions they made have been communicated to our friends, the officials and councillors of Bern and Fribourg at their request. Examination of the Jews captured in Savoy, the confessions extracted by torture from a group of Jews living in the county of Savoy, were evidently widely circulated as evidence of an international conspiracy. The Castellan of Chillon, deputy of the bailiff of Chablis there, to the officials, councillors, and citizens of Strasbourg. I understand that you want to know about the confessions of the Jews and the proofs brought against them. I am writing to tell you that the people of Bern have a copy of the Inquisition and Confession of the Jews, dwelling in their neighborhood, who were involved in putting poison into the wells there and in several other places, and that copy contains a detailed account of the truth of the matter. Many Jews have been tried after being put to the question, or in some cases, making confession without it, and have been condemned to be burnt. Some Christians, to whom Jews gave poison for use against Christians, have also been put on the wheel and tortured. For the burning of Jews and the torturing of Christians has gone on in numerous places within the county of Savoy. May God keep you. The confession made on the 15th of September 1348 in the castle of Chillon by the Jews of Villeneuve, imprisoned there on the charge of poisoning the wells, springs, and other places, and putting poison into food in order to destroy and wipe out the entire Christian religion. Balavigny, a Jewish surgeon who lived at Thonon, was arrested at Chillon after being found in the neighborhood. He was briefly put to the question, and when it was over, he confessed after a long interval that about 10 weeks earlier, the Rabbi Jacob, who had come from Toledo and had been living at Chambéry since Easter, sent him, by a Jewish boy, some poison, about the size of an egg, in the form of a powder, enclosed in a leather bag, accompanied by a letter, commanding him on pain of excommunication, and by the obedience he owed to the Jewish law, to put the poison into the larger public wells of the town, the ones most commonly used in order to poison the people using them, and not to tell anybody at all. The letter also said that rabbis had given orders for the same thing to be done in various other places. He confessed that one evening he secretly put the poisonous powder under a stone in a spring on the shore at Thonon. He further confesses that the boy showed him many identical letters addressed to numerous other Jews, specifically some addressed to Mossoyer, Banditon, and Samolay of Villeneuve, to Museo, Abraham, and Aquatus of Montreux, Jews residing at La Tour de Vevey, to Benetton and his son at Saint Maurice, and to Vivian, Jacob, Achatus, and Sonatus, Jews at Evian-les-Bains. Several letters of a like nature were sent to Hebrea and Musset, Jews at Monte. The boy told him that he had taken many others to various places, a long way away, but he, Balavigny, does not know to whom they were addressed. He further confessed that after he had put the poison in the spring at Thonon, he expressly forbade his wife and children to use the spring, but without telling them why. In the presence of many credible witnesses, he confessed by the Jewish law and by the 5 books of Moses that everything he had said was true. On the next day, Balavigny, voluntarily and without torture, maintained the truth of his confession, repeating it word for word in the presence of many credible witnesses and further confessing, of his own accord, that one day, on his way back from La Tour de Vevey, he had put into a spring below Montreux, namely, the Spring de la Connerade, a quantity of poison about the size of a nut, wrapped in a rag, which he had been given by Aquatus of Montreux, who lives in La Tour. He told Mancionus the Jew, who lives at Villeneuve, and Delosats, son of Muselotus, what he had done and warned them not to drink from the spring. He describes the poison as red and black in color. On the 19th of September, Balavigny confessed, without being put to the question, that 3 weeks after Pentecost Musus, the Jew of Villeneuve told him that he had put poison in the public drinking fountain of his own town, namely in the custom house there, and that afterwards he did not drink its water, but only drank from the lake. He also confessed that Musus told him that he had likewise placed poison in the public drinking fountain at Chillon, namely in the custom house under some stones. The spring was then investigated and some poison found. Some of it was given to a Jew, who died, thereby proving that it was poison. He said further that rabbis had instructed him and other Jews not to drink water for 9 days after poison had been put in it. And he said that as soon as he had put poison in the spring, he immediately warned other Jews. He confesses further that a good 2 months earlier, he had been at Evian, and while talking the matter over with a Jew called Jacob, had asked him, among other things, whether he had had a letter and poison like the others, to which Jacob replied that he had. Afterwards he asked him whether he had obeyed the instructions, to which Jacob replied that he had not placed the poison himself, but had given it to Savatus the Jew who had put it into the spring de Morer at Evian. He urged on Ballavigny the wisdom of dealing with the instructions in the same way. He confesses that Aquatus of Montreux told him that he had put poison into the spring above La Tour, which he uses regularly when he is staying there. He confesses that Samollet told him that he had put the poison which he had received into a spring, but refused to tell him which. Ballavigny, speaking as a surgeon, says further that if anyone suffering the effects of the poison comes into contact with someone else, especially while sweating, the other person will be infected, and that the infection can be transmitted by breath as well. He believes this to be the case because he has heard many experienced physicians say so, and is certain that the other Jews cannot acquit themselves of the charge, for they knew perfectly well what they were doing, and are guilty. Ballavigny was taken across the lake from Chillon to Clarens, to identify the spring in which he had confessed putting the poison. Upon arrival, he was taken to the spot, and as soon as he saw the spring, he said, "This is the spring where I put the poison." The spring was examined in his presence, and the linen rag or cloth in which the poison had been wrapped was found in the channel going from the spring by Henry Gerard, a notary public, in the presence of many people, and shown to the Jew. He confirmed that it was the linen cloth or rag in which the poison had been enclosed when he put it in the spring, adding that the poison was of two colors, black and red. The linen cloth or rag was taken away and is in safe keeping. Ballavigny confesses everything recorded here, adding that he believes that the poison is derived from the basilisk, for he has heard it said that the poison would not be efficacious otherwise, and is convinced that that is the case. Banditon, a Jew of Villeneuve, was likewise briefly put to the question on the 15th of September, and, when it was over, he confessed after a long interval that he had put a quantity of poison, about the size of a large nut, which had been given to him by Musaeus, a Jew of La Tour de Vevey, into the spring of Caroutet to poison people. The next day, Banditon, voluntarily and without being put to the question, confirmed that what he had confessed was true, confessing also that Rabbi Jacob, who had come from Toledo at Easter and was living at Chambéry, sent him at Piliers by a Jewish boy some poison about the size of a large nut, together with a letter which told him to put the poison into springs on pain of excommunication. He had put the poison, which was in a leather bag, into the spring of Sir Clytus de Roche. He further confesses that he saw many other letters addressed to Jews, which the boy was carrying, and that he saw him deliver one letter to Samollet, the Jew of Villeneuve, outside the upper gate. He says also that Massoletus the Jew told him that he had put poison in the spring near the bridge at Vevey, namely on the side towards Evian. The said Mamson, a Jew of Villeneuve, when he was put to the question on the 15th of September, confessed nothing about these matters, maintaining his total ignorance. But on the next day he voluntarily, of his own volition, and without being put to the question at all, confessed in the presence of many people that one day in the fortnight after Pentecost, he traveled from Monthey in the company of a Jew called Provençal, and as they went along, Provençal said to him, "You're going to put the poison which I'll give you into that spring, or it'll be the worse for you." And this was the spring of Chabloz Cruyez between Vevey and Muraz. So Mamson took a quantity of poison, about the size of a nut, and put it in the well. He believes that all the Jews round about Evian held a meeting before Pentecost to discuss the poisoning. He says that Ballavigny told him one day that he had poisoned the spring de la Connerade below Montreux. He says, moreover, that none of the Jews can acquit themselves of the charges, because they were all in it together and are guilty. When Mamson was brought before the commissioners on the 3rd of October, he changed none of his testimony, except that he had not put the poison into the spring. Before their execution, all these Jews confessed by the Jewish law that all these things were true, insisting that no Jew above the age of 7 could acquit himself of the charges, because they all knew everything that was going on. On the 8th of October, Bellieta, the wife of Aquatus the Jew, was briefly put to the question, and when it was over she confessed that around midsummer last, the said Provençal, who had been arrested and then released at Vevey, although she does not know on what grounds, gave her some poison, about the size of a large nut, and tied up in a linen rag or cloth, in front of the house where he was living. She was to put the poison into springs to poison the people using them, and she handed it on to Mamson and his wife for them to do it. On the 18th of October, Bellietta was put to the question, and when it was over, she confessed that Provençal had given her some poison, about as much as a large nut, to put in springs so that people using the water would fall sick and die. And she took the poison and did as she was told. Asked whether any Jew knew about the poisoning, she says that Jeannie the Jewess and José of Latour knew about it very well. Aquetus, son of Bellietta the Jewess, was put to the question to a moderate extent, and when it was over accused Aquetus the son of Banditon, who lived in Villeneuve, saying that he overheard through a window of his house Aquetus saying to his father Banditon that a Jew called Provençal, whom he didn't know, had 12 weeks previously given him some poison in a paper cornet, and told him to put the poison in some well-used spring. And he heard his father answer that he should put the poison in the first spring he could find. And afterwards he heard Aquetus tell his father that he had sprinkled the poison into the spring of Sir Clytus de Roche. When the accused Aquetus was brought before the two commissioners, he denied the accusations to Aquetus's face. Aquetus the accuser replied that that was what he had heard, and he wasn't making it up. And immediately he confessed that everything said out here was true, and that he had sprinkled poison in the spring, so that the people using it would die, and that he had revealed the matter to his father. Asked whether his father and the other Jews in Villeneuve know about the poisoning, he says that he is sure they do, because the leading members of the Jewish community always discuss matters among themselves outside the upper gate of Villeneuve, and the humbler Jews do the same. And he confessed these things without being put to the question, adding that the poison was green and black. And he confessed that this was true by the Jewish law and the 5 books of Moses, adding that, by his soul, the Jews richly deserved to die, and that indeed he had no wish to escape death, for he too richly deserved to die. On Friday the 10th of October 1348 in the castle at Châtel, an investigation was held on the authority of the court of the illustrious prince, our Lord Amadis, Count of Savoy, into the accusations noised abroad by public fame and clamor against the Jews of both sexes imprisoned there. They were shown to be guilty of trying to kill Christians by poisoning springs, wells, and other things used by them, and were accordingly punished. Their confession was made in the presence of many credible witnesses. Agimatus, a Jew, who had been staying at Geneva and was imprisoned in the castle there, was put briefly to the question, and then afterwards, after a long interval, he was put to the question again, this time to a moderate extent, whereupon he confessed in the presence of many credible witnesses the things unfolded below. Firstly, that in last Lent, the trading house of Claus de Rance sent him to Venice to buy silk and other things. When this came to the ears of Ruby Peyret, the rabbi at Chambéry, Rabbi Peyret sent for Agimatus, and when he had come into his presence, said to him, "It has come to our knowledge that you will be going to Venice to buy merchandise. Here's a sachet of poison, folded up in a bag of thin leather. Put a little in the wells, cisterns, and springs at Venice, and at the other places on your route, to poison the people using the water." Agimatus took the sachet full of poison and took it with him to Venice, and when he arrived he scattered some of the poison into a well or cistern of fresh water near the house of the said Germans to poison the people using it, affirming that that was the best source of fresh water in the town. He affirms also that Ruby Peyret promised him, Agimatus, that he could name his own reward for the deed. Moreover, he confesses voluntarily that he left as soon as he had done it, to avoid being arrested by the Burgesses and others, and that he went to Calabria and Apulia and threw poison into numerous wells there, and that he put poison into the spring in the piazza of Barletta, into the public spring at Toulouse, and into springs along the coast. Asked whether anyone died in the places where he put poison, he says that he does not know, because he always took himself off in a great hurry. Asked whether any Jews in those places were guilty, he says he does not know. And he confessed the truth of all these things on the 5 books of Moses, and a Jewish roll, and that he had lied about none of the things that had happened to him. Josetus the Jew, an inhabitant of Châtel, put briefly to the question, after a long interval confessed in the presence of many credible witnesses, that a good 14 weeks ago, Ruby Peyret, the rabbi at Chambéry, met him near his house and handed him a quantity of poison about as big as a fist in a piece of net, and he could see through the little holes that it held powder and that the powder was black. And he transferred the powder to a large paper cornet and put some into a spring in the middle of the road from Vevey to Châtel, which was used by everybody passing that way, and left the rest under a clod of grass and earth near a tower. And Ruby Peyret gave Jocetus 5 gold shillings for doing it. He confesses moreover that Ruby Peyret gave him 2 bags, each the size of an egg, with 2 letters which he was to deliver to 2 Jews living in La Tour de Vevey, Aquitus, and Abraham, to poison people with, telling them to put the poison into springs. The 2 Jews received the bags from him in their houses at La Tour, and said that they were prepared to carry out the instructions in their letters. Iconitus, a Jew who once lived at Basse but now at Châtel and was arrested there, was put to the question to a moderate degree, and when it was over, confessed after a long interval that 2 years ago, Aboujet, one of the richest and most powerful Jews in Basse, gave him some poison, which was white and about the size of 2 fists, outside his house, saying to him, "Go to Brussels and Hainault, and put this poison in the best springs in that area, to poison the people using them." And he gave him 2 florins for doing it, and said that he should put the poison secretly and stealthily into the springs, and tell nobody. When Iconitus had taken the poison, he left, and traveled to the places specified. And when he had reached Brussels, he left 2 lots of poison in springs in the town of Tinnemont, and at the top of the town, placing it stealthily under a large stone at about noon. And then he retreated hastily, and leaving the town, headed for Hainault, and there stealthily left another bag in a beautiful spring near the market town of Mons in Hainault, leaving it as before under a large stone to poison the people using the water, and again leaving immediately to go begging for bread elsewhere. Asked whether he knows what the poison was made of, he says he does not, and confesses that all these things are true on the 5 books of Moses. Aquatus Ruby, a Jew born in Warambon but now living in Châtel, was put briefly to the question, and afterwards confessed that a year ago he was at Le Pont de Beauvoisin and had lost all his money at dice, and was planning to leave for the region around Geneva, when Salamine the Jew, an inhabitant of Le Pont de Beauvoisin, came to him and said, "You've lost all your money, and you've got nothing. Go to those parts, but take this poison with you, and put it into springs and wells in the big and middling towns, and I'll give you 6 shillings in Savoy money." Aquatus took the poison, about as much as 2 fingers, in a piece of leather, together with the 6 shillings, and one day put the bag full of poison under a big stone in a spring at Perioso, near the drinking fountain at the Maison du Chat, to poison people using water from the spring. Asked if he had put poison anywhere else, he said not. He also said he did it for a laugh, but now he was sorry for what he had done. Asked whether any of the Jews in La Tour, Evian, Villeneuve, and Châtel knew anything about the poisonings, he said that he did not know, and that everything he had confessed was true, on the Jewish law. Aquatus, son of Jocetus the Jew, living at Châtel, was put to the question to a moderate extent on the 11th of October, and when it was over, confessed truthfully, after a long interval, that a good year ago he was staying at Chambéry and studying in the house of Peyret, the rabbi in Chambéry, and one day the rabbi called him and took him to his chamber and said, "Look, here's poison in a paper cornet. Take it, and put it in the well of Corvelis near the house of Rabbi Peyret." And he ordered him under pain of excommunication to do this, and so poison the people who drank the water, and not to tell anybody. Aquatus took the poison, which was a powder, and straightway put it deep in the said well. He says also that afterwards he did not drink the water but left Chambéry with his father and went to live at Châtel. And he confessed on the Jewish law that these things were true. The Jews confessed all these things in the presence of 2 notaries public and many other eminent people, and others specially summoned for the purpose.